Hello, everyone. I think we are now live. Welcome to this webinar. We are still seeing the participants numbers crawl up really fast, but I'm just going to get us started nice and slow. For those of you who have never seen me before, I am Laura Worm, and I work in the FSC Technology and Information Unit. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by my good colleague, Janneke Murphy, who will help present some of the tools that we're working on. So in this webinar today, we will give a short introduction to the collective package of EUDR-related digital tools, which will help companies being EUDR compliant if they are FSC license holders. We will show how all of the different tools connect. Then we'll dive briefly into each of them, and then we will leave time for Q&A towards the end. And on Q&A, we have a Q&A box that you can pose questions in, and we will ask you to be anonymous in those questions because we would like to be able to share a recording of those questions as well afterwards. And for GDPR reasons, if you post your name as part of your questions, then we have to cut away all of the Q&A. So please remain anonymous. Please use the upvoting function in the Q&A box if there's somebody else who asked a question that you would like to have answered, and then we'll tackle them with the first vote, the most votes first. So before we dive in, I just like to take a very small moment and just be happy, because if you, like us, have worked with the EUDR quite intensively, you will know that the last couple of months has been a very bumpy ride. With the EPP in November making suggestions to add a new risk category to the EUDR and really just sticking a giant stick into our wheels of development and rollout of all of the different tools that we are developing. Because they made the suggestion, because everything was up in the air again, we had to pause some of the development of our tools and evaluate the potential impact of their suggestions on our full solution, because we didn't want to establish systems which put more burden on you guys than we absolutely have to. So this has especially impacted the offering of FSC EUDR aligned reporting and the development of what we call the FSC Risk Hub. Luckily, we now seem to have a resolution which is reached without a huge impact on the overarching rule set, but which still gives us a year delay, which makes everything easier for everyone to implement in the best possible way, instead of implementing in the fastest possible way, which from our perspective is a huge benefit. However, while we do feel safer now, we are still waiting for the final approval of this amendment before we open that bottle of champagne and celebrate, and before we build the last pieces of our puzzle. And why don't we just kick off by looking at that puzzle in its totality? So let's zoom out and start from the very top. So FSC aligned for EUDR, the entire offering that we have comes in two sections. On the one hand, on the green hand side, we have the standards which enable us to support EUDR from a normative perspective. So this is where certification sits, and this is where we have the FSC Risk Hub. On the other side of the tools, in the blue section, this is where we are enabled to support companies in reporting on EUDR. So this is where FSC Trace sits, our blockchain solution. And this is also where FSC aligned reporting for EUDR sits as a functionality under FSC Trace. So we thought we would start off by taking a look at how these different tools connect and how they share data between them. So first, we have our GIS platforms. This is where we gather boundary data from FSC certified forests. This will become mandatory for all forest management certificate holders as a result of a motion that was passed at our last General Assembly. It's called Motion 61. Janneke will explain much more about this platform in a short while, but in short, it will enable certificate holders to upload their boundary data, so basically the shape of their forest area. And they can also add additional data layers, which if they would like to on a voluntary basis. This verification of the certified area is important to us in FSC because the whole premise of us being deforestation free is based on the notion that forests cannot get FSC certified if an area has been subject to deforestation or to conversion. For controlled input, so for FSC controlled wood, the responsibility of ensuring that an area is deforestation free will fall on the company who is introducing that controlled material into the FSC supply chains. But if we're talking about sourcing from FSC certified forest management areas, it is an integral part of our promise that it is deforestation free and degradation free. Then we have the FSC Risk Hub. The FSC Risk Hub is where we place and store and show the FSC risk assessments. The new thing about FSC Risk Hub is that we will take the risk assessments, which we've worked with for many years, and we will make them visual instead of sticking them in a PDF. Janneke will talk much more about those, so I'll leave it to that for now. Then we have the digital audit reports, and this is where the auditing of the new FSC regulatory module is captured. The regulatory module is a voluntary module under FSC. The digital audit reports is an existing tool, which is merely just being updated. So we don't need to focus that much on it here because it does have limited impact for the rest of the digital landscape for the time being. We just wanted to make sure that you know of it as part of the full solution. And then we have FSC Trace. So when a forest owner joins FSC Trace, they can, oh, sorry, I moved one step too far ahead. Let me just move back. When a forest owner joins FSC Trace, they can define their forest area and they can break that down into smaller plots of land, which is the definition that the EU talks about. This makes them able to very easily select specific areas of forests within their total forest area without having to upload the GeoJSON file, which is required under EUDR for every single forest over and over and over again. FSC Trace is also the platform where the entire supply chain can capture the sales in between each other, and they can enable data flow. So this is where users set up data sharing rules. This is where they connect to each other. This is also where they indicate what part of their purchase goes into which products. So in essence, FSC Trace is the place where we capture everything from the geolocation data, the time of harvest, the country of production, and all of the other required data elements for EUDR, and we enable it to travel between trading partners. And then lastly, we have FSC aligned reporting for EUDR, which is a tool that's integrated under FSC Trace. This tool will support companies in the future in creating the due diligence statements, which essentially is capturing geolocation and time of harvest of products that are tracked on the platform. It also enables companies to compile all of the data needed for the EUDR due diligence report, which is the larger reporting format under EUDR, which is actually only required when you're visited by a national enforcement body or the competent authority, as they're called. But first, let's look at what most companies are focusing on right now, which is how do we get able to create due diligence statements, these statements that you have to submit to the EU platform, EU Traces. So the due diligence statements follow the individual trades, and FSC Trace can support them from start to finish. So here's how. So firstly, FSC Trace will identify all of the forests that have contributed to the production of a product. Then it will compile all of the geolocations and time of harvest data from that supply chain, which has been used in a product if the information is stored on FSC Trace. Then it will connect to FSC Risk Hub and pull all of the risk information of the forests that are connected to supplying to that product. It can then connect directly to the EU Traces platform when that becomes available, so it can push information directly into the EU system And it would then be able to have returned a due diligence statement reference number, which can then be passed on automatically to the next link in the supply chain. And lastly, but also quite important for EUDR compliance, FSC Trace can capture what we call all of the data for a data briefcase for EUDR due diligence reporting, including all of the risk assessments and the risk mitigation information for each company in the supply chain who have shared this data. This means that FSC Trace will also enable companies to create the comprehensive due diligence reports, which they will need if they are visited by a competent authority. This report will, of course, be formatted in line with regulatory compliance. To top all of this whole platform and this whole data setup has been built in such a way where we can expand it for other legislations coming up in the future if we need to. So this was a very top level introduction to how all of our different tools that we are putting out on the market are connected to each other and how they can enable data to show. So hopefully it makes it a bit easier to follow along when we now dive into each of these tools individually. So why don't we start in the forest with the geospatial tools? So Janneke, I will hand over to you.
Great. Thank you, Loa. My name is Janneke Murphy, and I am here with FSC International. And as Loa mentioned, we'll speak quite briefly about some exciting new upcoming GIS tools, starting with FSC Certified Area Submittal Tool. So, have you ever wondered where exactly do we actually have FSC certified forests? Well, so did our FSC members. They passed a motion back in 2021 to complement a changing digital landscape to require certificate holders to submit digital maps of their certified lands. This motion has, of course, indeed passed, which we are continuing to now implement and finalize. Only upon finalizing the digital tool and related advice note will this then become mandatory for our certificate holders. We know that some of our FSC certificate holders might not actually even be legally allowed to share this data publicly, and some might not even want to. Nonetheless, they will still have to at least share the information with us at FSC. To make this a requirement through our normative framework, we will be releasing an advice note. So we don't know yet what the final public map will look like. This was an example from before, but the idea is that those who agree to publish this publicly will then have their certified area displayed in a global map. This data will not be downloadable, but this is actually quite interesting because there are many that are likely curious to understand more about where exactly our FSC certified forests are. But it's not just people, but some digital tools that need to also confirm where we are FSC certified, as mentioned by Loa, including FSC Trace. So it is through this tool, the Certified Area Submittal tool, that FSC Trace will then validate indeed the harvested material with the geolocation originates from an FSC certified forest. This technology is currently being tested, and we will invite existing certificate holders to join that process voluntarily, and we look forward to their support. It is recommended to encourage your suppliers to participate in this process currently we are working on some explanatory material in the meantime before finalizing the technology and then ultimately releasing the advice note to make it a normative requirement. Now, another key GIS portion of the FSC aligned for EUDR is our FSC Risk Hub. So a quick look back into earlier this year, we published a new risk assessment framework which sets FSC requirements about how to assess and mitigate this risk of sourcing. And as I hope most of you are familiar with, To use FSC in supporting EUDR compliance, the risk assessments will play a key role as they assess risk when not sourcing from FSC certified areas. And at FSC International, we have hit the ground running because there are 40 risk assessments already underway. Want to learn more? Want to keep up? Well, check FSC Connect because we have a country requirement schedule published. This is a page on FSC Connect where we are posting the timelines of risk assessment development and including direct links for consultations and how to sign up to learn more. I will post the link into the chat. The FSC risk assessments are normative documents, so those will be published in our FSC Document Center. But we've also put effort into making these documents more interactive, and this serves the foundation for FSC Risk Hub. Here, we are transforming the data taken from the Excel versions of our FSC risk assessments into GIS. This includes a risk dashboard where users can click through and dive deeper into risk designations at country, indicator, and designation levels. It will present data in both a national and subnational scale. Sometimes people prefer a good old clear table presentation, so users can also opt for that with a table view instead to sift data through that way. So here we're presenting a snapshot of what this actually looks like right now in the current development. Here you can see some sample data from Romania, which we are only using to test the platform. The data itself is not validated. But you can see what it would look like where we are clearly presenting whether risk is negligible or non-negligible per indicator, and it will include a clear description of the risk and thresholds where applicable. So before we were in a big rush with EUDR to get these risk assessments out the door and pushing for certificate holder-led risk assessments. But with the extended timelines explained by Loa earlier, we can now prop up our upcoming FSC risk assessments and are prioritizing the technology solution to be built for those. Because with or without EUDR, these are indeed valuable tools and a technology solution will only support our innovation and accessibility as an FSC system. We're still developing these FSC risk assessments, so we don't have any ready and approved at this moment yet, of course, but they are scheduled to be published towards the end of Q2 2025. So simultaneously, we are continuing to develop and test this platform. Thereafter, our first updated risk assessments will be published on FSC Risk Hub and GIS-based, and then connected as a key component of your due diligence system for FSC aligned for EUDR. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannicka. Okay, so we are now in a position where we have all of the forests on a map and we have the risk designations. So let's look at how we then get to supply chain traceability. We will start with a small video. If you've seen this video before, this is your 4 minutes countdown to get a cup of coffee. If you haven't seen it before, this is a core explainer of what FSC Trace is and does. The reason why we're showing it is because it's a much more concise way to explain all of this than I could be explaining with slides, which leaves us more room for Q&A towards the end. So let's kick it off.
The Forest Stewardship Council has been fighting for resilient forests and forest communities for more than 30 years now. Over that time, supply chain traceability has become increasingly difficult as goods travel the world in more and more complex ways, making it ineffective and insufficient for today's sustainability goals, legislation, and companies aiming for ambitious targets. To fix this, we're shaking up supply chain traceability at FSC. Introducing FSC Trace, a secure digital record for verified transactions and sourcing data, ensuring streamlined compliance and verification at every supply chain stage. How does it work? Powered by blockchain technology, FSC Trace lets FSC license holders confidentially, flexibly, and efficiently access and exchange data in near real time, aiding verification, due diligence, and compliance with evolving regulations. FSC Trace enhances our commitment to certificate holders by allowing participants to verify supplier certification status at the point of transaction, generate verified, traceable claims about traded products, and record and share data on the raw materials in FSC certified products. How does a trade get verified on FSC Trace? First, you enter a trade. The trade now appears in both partners' records. The counterparty confirms the volume of the product traded. If the volume matches, the transaction is verified. That trade or block is added to the blockchain, and the trade has now been verified. How do I upload transactions? Depending on your needs, there are several ways to upload data. Direct entry. Record individual transactions directly via the website. Bulk uploads. Upload spreadsheets with hundreds of transactions at once. And API integration. Integrate your IT systems with FSC Trace using an API. This will enable relevant data to flow between the two systems. What type of data will FSC Trace provide? FSC Trace helps certificate holders comply with upcoming regulations like the European Union Deforestation-Free Regulation, or EUDR, by capturing geolocation and time of harvest, product type and classification, species in the product, volume, mass, weight metrics, and country of production. How do I control my data? With FSC Trace, you have full flexibility over how you use it. Your entire product portfolio needn't be on the platform. You can choose what products to include, how much information to share with trading partners, and customize sharing settings for each partner. Plus, all data is encrypted when it leaves you, ensuring it stays secure, and neither FSC nor certification bodies have access to the data unless invited by you as a certificate holder. How do I export data? We are building a reporting tool. Companies will be able to create reports required by legislation, such as due diligence statements for the European Union Deforestation-Free Regulation, EUDR, and data sheets needed for CSR reporting. Additionally, it will enable you to export FSC-required reports such as volume summaries, species lists, and trading partner overviews. Data will be available both as raw data in spreadsheets and as compiled reports. How do I get started? You can start preparing for FSC Trace today by exploring our data templates, organising your data and engaging your trading partners in data readiness exercises. Learn more at fsc.org/FSC Trace.
Okay, so the biggest question that we always get asked whenever we show this video is, okay, when can I have access? When can I start using this tool? And to answer that question, we have to revisit this slide. We are working as fast as we can, but as long as we don't know for certain what the EU will require from whom, we can't build the actual reporting tools. But that extra year of implementation is giving us some benefits. It's no secret that we have been racing like mad to meet the end of 2024 timelines. So our original building and rollout timeline for FSC Trace, back when it was called FSC Blockchain, this whole tool was invented way before there was anything that was called EUDR. And our original timeline and rollout for this was years longer than what happened when EUDR came along and said we need a tool in place by the end of the year. In many aspects, this additional acceleration of timeline has been good because it has forced us in FSC as a team to become much more agile than we were. But in other ways, it has also forced us to work in many different areas at the same time, doing simultaneous build on things that had to interconnect. instead of focusing on building one thing really well and then moving on and building the next one really well and connecting all of that up. Given the extended timeline, we have therefore decided to utilize this extra time for more thorough testing than we had time to do before, just to ensure the robustness of our platform. We're therefore scaling back the initial rollout of the platform to focus on core company traceability. This enables a more controlled and effective start. This also enables all of you guys, all of the companies around the world, to really get to know the platform, to play around with it in sandbox mode, to join up all of your supply chain. Then we've shifted to a new release model. So instead of launching everything at once, we are moving forward with iterative releases. So in other words, we will start releasing one thing at a time, and then over the next quarters, we will get to a full platform. To promote transparency and ease for all of you guys to know, well, where are we in this development stage? We will launch a feature roadmap, which will be publicly available on our website so that you can get informed about our progress and what is coming up next. We would also really like to hear from all of you on what is most important for you that we focus on first. There's a QR code on the screen right now, which I invite you to scan and to reply to, and it will also be in the follow-up email after this webinar. And lastly, to ensure that once you get an invitation to the platform, that it's really easy for you to figure out, well, is the platform right now able to cater for my very complex supply chain setup or not? You will be met with an onboarding survey where we, through a few filtering questions, relatively easy, can tell you whether or not the platform is ready for you or not, or whether we encourage you to wait for a little bit longer. What is important to note is that we are onboarding all of the early adopters right now, the ones who are approved as early adopters in the FSC Early Adopter Program, and they can invite their supply chains, and their supply chain can invite their supply chain trading partners, etc. So we have organic growth of the platform. Beyond the early adopters program, we have an onboarding freeze until the end of the year, and we have the full approval of the EUDR in its current form. We are then anticipating that we will start the expanded onboarding from early January next year, which means that we will start sending out invitations to FSC Trace. We have a priority order of who we'll be sending invitations out to, which is that we will start with the priority access list, which I'll tell you more about in a second. Then we'll reach out to the forest managers, so the certified forest areas, their managers. We'll do that because the most important thing for most people to get to first is the time of harvest and the geolocation, and we want to make sure that we get as many forest managers on the platform as we can as fast as possible. Then we'll reach out to everybody who has a trader certification under FSC, and that's because it's often the traders which moves the products across the EU barriers. And therefore, they are a very key target group for us to have on the platform to make this tool suitable for EUDR compliance. And then we'll get to everyone else in one joint last group. It's anticipated that everyone will have ad access before the end of Q1 of next year. There's a couple of key points that addresses the questions that we always ask first. So therefore, I just want to make sure that I speak to them. First and foremost, the implementation of FSC Trace remains voluntary. It means that all certificate holders, all promotional license holders of FSC decide for themselves whether or not they want to use FSC Trace. The core platform, so what you saw in that video, is free of charge to use and is part of what you're getting when you have an FSC license. We will be adding premium features. We don't know yet exactly what those premium features are and will be, but we do anticipate that we will be launching them by the end of the year next year. It could be stuff like special setups, catering for a specific setup in your company, or special integration opportunities, those kinds of things. We are focusing primarily on FSC certified products, so products that are covered by an FSC certification. And I already saw in the chat whether or not there's a requirement for a logo on those products. There is not, but there is a requirement that the product is covered by an FSC claim on the invoice, and that both of the trading partners are covered by an FSC license, meaning that they hold either an FSC certification or an FSC promotional license. That is the way that you get access to the platform. It is very, very important for us to have good interoperability. This means that we are working, like you saw in the earlier slides, on interoperability directly with the EU Traces platform, but it also means that it's central to us that we have interoperability with other solutions providers out there, because we know that companies will be choosing different platforms, and that we have good interoperability directly with the tools that you use to manage your production on a day-to-day basis, so you don't need to do a lot of manual typing in of information about the products that you buy and sell and produce. There are many different ways right now to get access, and I know that people are likely asking, well, how do I know when I will get an invite? So there are a few things that we know already now. You might get an invite tomorrow from one of the early adopters or from one of their trading partners that they have been inviting onto the trial. The invite will go to the company representative who is the legally responsible for the FSC certification. If that is not you, and if you know that you want to be notified when the invitation comes, then we urge that you give a note to that person in your company saying, please keep an eye out from FSC Trace, which will be the sender of the email, because I would like to sign up for FSC Trace as soon as we can. If you're really eager to be in the first batch of potential users, then we encourage you to scan the QR code on the middle of the slide here. That is to sign up for the priority access list. And they are the first group who will be invited into the platform. In this form, you will be asked a few questions about your certification setup and which countries you operate in and those kinds of things. It's fairly simple to fill in. And it's not binding, meaning that all it does is it makes sure that you get an invitation as the first group, and then you can choose to activate that invitation or not the minute that it arrives. Then lastly, we know that a lot of companies are working with many different tech partners. They might already have some tech partners that are really happy of working with, and they want to see how can the current solutions that they already have integrate with FSC solutions. So there we are exploring integrations with other tech partners. And if you have such a tech partner and you would want us to talk to them, then we encourage that you provide them the last QR code on the slide, where we have a forum for the different tech providers that we know of. And we talk openly, even with our direct competitors, about integrations and collaboration and being able to make data travel. This is a forum that we meet with on a regular basis. So just to make sure that that is quite clear, what happens on FSC Trace is that it enables us to combine data from many different data sources from many different forest areas, meaning that it doesn't matter whether a product has 1 or 1,000 forests that input to it, we can combine the information in a scalable way. One of the questions that we often get asked is what happened then when you have FSC control wood, because you wouldn't get the origin data directly from the forest. How do you then capture it? So I'd like to speak to that on this slide. So for the FSC certified forest, as you can see in 1A, we get the geolocation and the species and the time of harvest directly from the forest area, and it's then transferred through the supply chain. But for the controlled wood input, which is what you have in 1B, it is the company who introduces this material into the FSC supply chain, who is responsible for making sure that this product is covered by an updated risk assessment that is compliant to EUDR, who has the responsibility of capturing the geolocation of the material and the time of harvest of the material. Because this company, in the scope of their certificate, has that they are able to transform non-certified materials into controlled wood, they are able to fill in this information into FSC Trace. For all other companies, these areas will be grayed out unless they're forest management certificate holders. So in essence, it's only the ones who have control wood and a risk assessment of control wood in the scope of their certificate. They're the only ones who will be able to add this information to the platform. When it's then added to the platform, it is able to travel throughout the platform on the exact same terms as FSC certified material from an FSC certified forest area. Then we, of course, know that a lot of companies don't work in batch productions and they don't have batch numbers, which seems to be what EU thought that every company in the world would have for every single commodity when they wrote the legislation. So on FSC Trace, what we've done is we've made you able to set up rules and date intervals, which enable you to use the platform also for percentage systems and for credit systems, or everything that works with mass balance instead of batch productions. So let's imagine that you have a pulp mill and you get 100 trucks of wood chips every single day, and they're all added on the top of a silo of raw materials. And you know that it will take you a month and a half for all of the content, all of the raw material in that silo to be turned into wood pulp. On FSC Trace, you can therefore set up rules which ensure that all of the geolocation and all of the time of harvest for the wood chips that you've received in the last month and a half are combined into the data that you share for the due diligence statements and that you can pass along the supply chain. This is because a due diligence statement is allowed to include all of the sources of origin, so many potential sources of origin. It just can't be missing any sources of origin. And this gives us a flexible means to address the fact that many companies have much more complex production setups than what the legislation seemed to have been designed for. So we hope that this will make it much more manageable in everyday life for all of the companies who have much more complex company setups. We've told you that you might get an invitation from FSC Trace. So we thought that if that happens, you might want to know what happens then. How do you then get access? So the first step is that you get an invitation to join. This could be because one of your trading partners have been invited to join, or because you've signed up for the priority access. As I said, this invitation will go to the main contact person for the certificate in the database, so make sure that they know that you're looking for that email. The person will then go to sign up on FSC Trace. This will then spark a check in our end on whether or not an electronic trademark license agreement has been signed with FSC or not. The only reason why we're checking that is because we need to have the credentials of a person who can sign. If you don't have an electronic trademark license agreement signed, you will get an email with instructions for the next steps. In this step, the certification body that you have will be asked to initiate the signature process. And then that they invite you to sign the updated agreement. And as soon as that agreement has been signed, the terms and conditions for FSC Trace can be accepted. And the main contact person can then create additional users, meaning that they can create a user for you in case that you are not the main contact person. This new user, in case that's now you've now been assigned rights, you can then be assigned permissions to use FSC Trace and other FSC related tools if needed. And you can then add additional users if you need to, and you are then ready to start using FSC Trace and setting up trading partners and configuring your products. Of course, all of this has the biggest benefit if every single node in a supply chain, every single company in a supply chain is using FSC Trace. There's no doubt that that is where the true beauty of this system unlocks. But there is already benefit if you start using it and it's only you in the supply chain who has access and who's using it. The first thing that happens that the minute that you sign up and you indicate who am I trading with, we will start automating the verification of your supplier's certification status. So if you're certified today to FSC, you will know that once a year you'll have to go to our search database and you will have to screen dump whether or not your trading partners are still certified or not. we will, as soon as you use FSC Trace, we will remove that requirement from you and start doing that monitoring for you. The second benefit, if you then start using the platform to also capture all of your trades, is that you will automatically get volume summaries, you will get species lists, you will get product group lists based on the purchases and the sales that you registered on the platform. So we will take care of a lot of that reporting that's associated to a chain of custody certification. Then the third benefit is that you can create specific fields that you might want to have for your supply chains. You might have a customer who's requiring for you to share specific data elements or share always the same type of document, etc. FSC Trace enables you to do that and do that in an encrypted way. Then, of course, it is fairly simple to create data sharing. So you can very easily, throughout an entire supply chain, share all of the data elements that you want to share, and you have full control of the data sharing across the supply chain. When you first register on FSC Trace, you, of course, need to figure out, how does this platform work? How do I work with it? And therefore, we have a sandbox mode. In the sandbox mode, you can create trades with imaginary trading partners. You can create claims that you're just making up. And the reason why we've enabled this is because when you have a blockchain platform, of course, that platform, because it's blockchain, will, whenever you're registering things on the live system, it will be permanent records. So in order to not contaminate your data with things that you're just making up as you're testing, we have the sandbox mode. We encourage that once you use the sandbox mode, that you still upload your real trading partners, that you still upload and configure your products, because then you don't have to go through that whole process twice. Then you play around with the system in sandbox mode, you test the functionality, you test upload, and then you move to the live version as soon as you are ready. A lot of the questions that we get, and I just have to do a quick time check, a lot of the questions that we check is, well, what can I do right now? How can I get ready to use FSC Trace right now? As explained before, it is the primary contact with the certificate who will receive the information. So you might already start now by identifying who is that person, and do you know who that is, or can you investigate inside your company? Then you can also check, well, have we actually signed an ETLA? The easiest way to check that is to check whether or not you have access to FSC Connect, or that person has access to FSC Connect and can sign in. If not, then you can use this time between now and the invitation to get that contractual process completed, so you don't have to wait for it afterwards. Then you can also start testing the bulk upload templates. And one of the things that we found in the early adopter program is that one of the big steps for companies is actually to get their data standardized across different systems, and being able to set up their products and set up their trading partners on FSC Trace. And this is because we're in this with EUDR. They're combining data points which might origin from very different systems inside companies, where some is stored in a design in the design platform, and other is stored in a purchasing platform, and third things are stored in a sales platform. So what we encourage that you do is that you start organizing your data now, so that you know that your data is ready, that you have automated processes already designed and ready to go the minute that you have access to the platform and you want to play around. I will be very shortly sharing what you can do with the bulk upload templates, which we've already released and which you can use to make sure that you have the data structure that you need. And then, of course, you might also wish to start engaging with your trading partners and preparing to the use of FSC Trace. Because if you proactively start approaching them now, that can accelerate the rate with which your organization can jointly harvest the data of the power of data and information. So if you've already told your trading partners that you're planning to use FSC Trace or test FSC Trace, well, then they know that they would likely be asked to do so as well. We also have a full website on how you can get ready for EUDR, which also covers the FSC regulatory module, etc. I placed a link, and it's also where the QR code on this page goes to. We really encourage that you go there and see the first steps you can take. Last couple of slides before the Q&A is focused on the bulk upload templates. So I've referred them a couple of times, so why don't we just do a tiny dive deeper into them. They're available already now on our website, and we really encourage you go and you download them and you start looking into how you can connect your data sources, your data structures with the bulk upload templates. All of them, there are 5 of them, are structured in the same way. The ones that are really relevant to throw yourself at right now are the trading partner ones, so the number 1, and the number 2 for product definitions. The rest of them are only really valuable once you have access to the platform and can use it to capture actual trades. But what we found in the early adopters program is that it's also in sheet 1 and 2 that most companies have to spend quite a bit of time of gathering all of the different data elements needed. And this is not because it's difficult data from an FSC perspective or in connection to your FSC certification, but it's because EU are requiring a few bits and pieces of different data points that are not necessarily directly connected to how you would normally register things under FSC. All of the templates follow the same structure, so I'm just going to give you a quick tour of the actual structure. First and foremost, they have an instruction, which is the guidance notes on how you actually use the templates. This is where you see which of the fields are mandatory, how is the whole file structured. Then you have the data upload sheet. This is where you input the actual data. Who are my trading partner? Which types of products do I have? And what are all the different variants of products that I have? This is often where you would copy paste information from other data sources. So as you can see in the illustrative image here, we have formulas inside the sheet which will color code whether you are using the right data format. So for example, are you putting text in a numbers field? But the minute that you copy paste all of this information into that sheet, you will overwrite those formulas. Because that's just how Excel works. So therefore, we've also introduced a check sheet. And this sheet goes in and checks all of the information that you have in the upload sheet. And it tells you very easily whether you have mistakes in data formatting, and shows you which row it has to do with and what you might need to do to fix it. And then lastly, we've also made sure that all of them have an open reference sheet. So this is where we list, for example, what are all of the species that we're talking about? What are the different FSC claim types, etc. You're not meant to use it for anything, but it can be really valuable to have as a reference if you keep getting a mistake, for example, figuring out, oh, it's because it's called FSC mixed and not FSC mixed, as it used to be called, is just an example of a data format that we often see coming out wrong. Okay, lastly, we know that adopting all of these new technologies can be complex and that you will probably have to individually assess cost and value and complexity, etc. What we're doing to support all of this is that we have these recurring webinars. We will continue these webinars next year. The new series will soon go out for invitation, and where we continuously update the content as we get closer and closer to rollout and implementation. We also have guidance materials and training materials, which is available on our websites, etc. We will have FAQs, or we do have FAQs. We have step-by-step guides, training videos, and all of the recorded webinars from the past. And then we have a dedicated support help desk, which is already live. So if you write connect@fsc.org, that will take you to our tiered support system. So this is already designed to address the needs of different user groups, from technical troubleshooting for IT specialists to specific raised questions by compliance officers, etc. And as for when we see more and more need, when we see more and more people joining the platforms, and therefore more and more support tickets likely to arrive, we have already made sure that we will scale this help desk to ensure that we get timely response to any support needs from our certificate holders. And we have also dedicated ourselves to a very high uptime for all of these different tools. Okay. That was my presentation. I'm doing a quick time check again. And I see we have 21 questions, which is quite a lot. Good. Let me just look at the most upvoted ones. The most upvoted one was will it be possible to use FSC Trace in any country, for example, in China, which wants to hide satellite data? Yes, it will be possible to use FSC Trace also in China. We are already testing that. China wants to hide satellite data, yes, but they don't want to hide GeoJSON files, which is what you would be using on FSC Trace. Then the second question, Yannick, I'm going to push that to you. FSC Risk Hub was intended to be released in October 2024. Why did this delay up to Q2 2025 occur?
Thanks, Loa. I'm not sure if I can answer into the granular details, but from my understanding, we knew our understanding before was that EUDR would come into effect in 2 weeks from now. So we were really focusing first on the certificate holder led risk assessments, but this would also turn into a bit of a domino effect because how is that value added for the due diligence reporting, et cetera, et cetera. So now, as I mentioned, we're repivoting to focus on the FSC led risk assessments as we're validating the data. And those are ideally very valuable for certificate holders, and those are not now available until Q2 of 2025, which we knew since the beginning. So we have time to ensure that whatever platform we develop is indeed really robust and works to what we are intending it to be. Hope that answers it.
Thank you, Yannicka. I'll take a stab at the next one, which is really asking, why do we need, essentially I'm paraphrasing here, but why do we need all of this on top of an FSC certification? Because we already have intact supply chain, we already have chain of custody, we all have audits on an annual basis, so we should have certified all this already. And to some extent, yes, that is correct. But there are a couple of things that the current FSC certification does not cover. And those are some of the data elements that we have under the EUDR. And let me see if I can get my mouse over here so I can actually show this slide. So the challenge is that we have FSC and we have that from forest to shelf, and we had that always. But there are a couple of requirements under EUDR which is not covered in the regular FSC certification, and that is the geolocation and time of harvest data, which the EU requires that if you want to import or export or trade across barriers or place on the European market products that can be connected to deforestation, you have to be able to show geolocation down to a plot of land, and you have to show time of harvest for that individual product. This very highly intensive data sharing is not part of the core FSC chain of custody certification, where we are essentially saying, well, two parts that trade with each other, if we check each of those, then we don't need the data to travel throughout the entire supply chain because we verify each link in the supply chain. So we don't have geolocation and time of harvest requirements for the forest owners for all just FSC certified materials from the forest, and we don't have this ability to transfer data across the entire supply chain. So that is why we need a new and better solution or an updated solution to comply with EUDR. Another reason why we need additional solutions for EUDR is that while FSC is a traceability tool, the EU requires that you do due diligence and risk assessment of every single product and every single supply chain that you have. And that is also not an integral part of the standard FSC certification. It can be an integral part if you choose to add a regulatory module certification to your certificate, but it's not an integral part of the core FSC certification. It was a long speech from me, but that's basically the difference. And I will do we can take a couple of more. Okay. Is geolocation data a mandatory requirement for forest managers, which they must include on FSC Trace? And is the geolocation transfer already available tool? So in other words, if a grant needs to make its own due diligence, can it get makes its own? Can it get some? Sorry, I always hated myself when people read the questions out loud on a webinar. Okay, so basically, is the geolocation mandatory for forest managers to include an FSC Trace? It is not mandatory per se, but it would make very little sense for a forest manager to use FSC Trace and not include geolocation, because they would be requested that information through other means anyway, regardless. The certified area submittal tool is ready and in pilot stage. So forest managers can use that tool if they would like to, and start piloting and using it today. And the ability to upload geolocation and time of harvest is also ready on FSC Trace. So the minute that a forest owner gets access to FSC Trace, that availability is also there already. Okay, let me just see. Then the next one is essentially who is meant to do the risk assessments. Is it each supplier in the chain, or is it the paper mill who then passes it on down through the supply chain? In reality, this is not dictated by FSC. This is in reality dictated by the EUDR, which defines who is what they call an operator, and therefore who is the one who is placing the products on the market, and therefore who is the ones who have to do the risk assessment and who can get away with just doing what is called a due diligence check. So it's really a question of whether or not you are the one placing a product on the market inside the EU, or whether you are buying the product inside an EU market. The beauty of using FSC and FSC certified products, especially if you're using FSC 100% certified products, is that you inherit these risk assessments because they're an integral part of FSC certification. You will still have to do a due diligence setup because that's required by the legislation. You will still have to gather these risk assessments, and if there is a risk, you will still have to indicate which mitigating actions you have taken to address the risk. But if you're really far down the supply chain, the likelihood is that you will, to a large extent, if you use a setup like the one we have in FSC, that you would be able to inherit a lot of these data points, and that the workload therefore would be minimized. But the legal liability is on you if that's the legal liability of the legislation. So I really encourage that you go and identify what is your role in the definitions of the legislation. If you go to that FSC journey to EUDR, we do have a Q&A there that will help you get to the question of what is your role under the legislation. Okay, I think we are at time. And let me just see if there's one last fast one. You've mentioned that with the upcoming risk assessments, you can align with the FSC EUDR without sourcing the materials from actually certified forests. Yannick, I think that one is for you. So basically, if you are not sorting from certified forests, can you use the regular risk assessments to align with EUDR? If we close on that one.
Yes, but only through the updated risk assessment framework. So you can find that on connect.fsc.org and find FSC risk assessments. I can throw that in the chat. And really quickly, however, if you are certified or sourcing from FSC certified forests and using the regulatory module, the amount of groundwork that you need to do and paperwork is drastically less. So we highly encourage that.
Yes, always easier. We are at time. I see that there's a lot of open questions. I will make sure that all of them are replied to in our FAQ. If they are not there already, and we will also in the follow-up email post a link directly to our FAQ where you can also see a lot of the answers that we've already given to these reoccurring questions. Thank you very much, everyone, for asking a lot of questions and for staying along and listening to this update. We will share more dates for upcoming webinars in 2025 as we get ready to roll out all of these different platforms. Until then, have a lovely holiday season if you celebrate that, and a good evening or a good day or wherever you are. Thank you.